Happy Friday, 8th graders, and we are back for another day of reading The Book Thief. In fact, we will finish The Book Thief today. So, the first chapter, The Ribcage Plains. Her hand was sore by page 3. Words are so heavy, she thought, but as the night wore on, she was able to complete 11 pages. Page 1. I try to ignore it, but I know this all started with a train in the snow and my coughing brother. I stole my first book that day. It was a manual for digging graves, and I stole it on my way to Himmel Street. She fell asleep down there on a bed of drop sheets with the paper cutting at the edges, up on the taller paint can. In the morning, Mamma stood above her, her chlorinated eyes questioning. Liesel, she said, what on earth are you doing down here? I'm writing, Mamma. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Rosa stomped back up the steps. Be back up in 5 minutes, or you get a bucket treatment. Versteht? I understand. Every night, Liesel made her way down to the basement. She kept the book with her at all times. For hours she wrote, attempting each night to contemplate 10 pages of her life. There was so much to consider, so many things in danger of being left out. Just be patient, she told herself. And with the mounting pages, the strength of her writing first grew. Sometimes she wrote about what was happening in the basement at the time of writing. She had just finished the moment when Papa had slapped her on the church steps and how they Heil Hitlered together. Looking across, Hans Huberman was packing the accordion away. He just played for half an hour, as Liesel wrote. Page 43. Page 42. Papa sat with me tonight. He brought the accordion down and sat close to where Max used to sit. I often look at his fingers and face when he plays. The accordion breathes. There are lines on his cheeks. They look drawn on. And for some reason, when I see them, I want to cry. It's not for any sadness or pride. I just like the way they move and change. Sometimes I think my papa is an accordion. When he looks at me and smiles and breathes, I hear the notes. After 10 nights of writing, Munich was bombed again. Lisa was up to page 102 and was asleep in the basement. She did not hear the cuckoo or the sirens, and she was holding the book in her sleep when Papa came to wake her. Liesel, come! She took the book thief and each of her other books, and they fetched Frau Holzefeld. Page 175. A book floated down the Amper River. A boy jumped in, caught up to it, and held it in his right hand. He grinned. He stood waist deep in the icy Decemberish water. How about a kiss, Samich? He said. By the next raid, on October 2nd, she was finished. Only a few dozen pages remained blank, and the book thief was already starting to read over what she'd written. The book was divided into 10 parts, all of which were given the title of books or stories and described how each affected her life. Often, I wonder what page she was up to when I walked down Himmel Street in the dripping tap rain 5 nights later. I wonder what she was reading when the first bomb dropped from the rib cage of a plane. Personally, I like to imagine her looking briefly at the wall, and Max Vandenberg's tightrope cloud, his dripping sun, and the figures walking toward it. Then she looks at the agonizing attempts of her paint written spelling. I see the Fuhrer coming down the basement steps with his tied together boxing gloves hanging casually around his neck. And the book thief reads, rereads, and rereads her last sentence for many hours. The book thief, last line. I have hated the words, and I have loved them, and I hope I have made them right. Outside the world whistled. The rain was staying. The next chapter, The End of the World, Part 2. Almost all the worlds are fading now. The black book is disintegrating under the weight of my travels. That's another reason for telling this story. What did we say earlier? Say something enough times and you never forget it. Also, I can tell you what happened after the book thief's words had stopped and how I came to know her story in the first place. Like this. Picture yourself walking down Himmel Street in the dark. Your hair is getting wet and the air pressure is on the verge of a drastic change. The first bomb hits Tommy Mueller's apartment block. His face twitches innocently in his sleep, and I kneel at his bed. Next, his sister Christina's feet are sticking out from under the blanket. They match the hopscotch footprints on the street. Her little toes, their mother sleeps a few feet away. 4 cigarettes sit disfigured in her ashtray, and the roofless ceiling is hot plate red. Himmel Street is burning. The sirens began to howl. Too late now, I whispered, for that little exercise. Because everyone had been fooled and fooled again. First up, the Allies had feigned a raid on Munich in order to strike at Stuttgart. But next, 10 planes had remained. Oh, there were warnings, all right. In Molchi, they came with the bombs. A roll call of streets: Munich, Ellenberg, Johansen, Himmel, the main street plus 3 more in the poor part of town. In the space of a few minutes, all of them were gone. A church was chopped down. Earth was destroyed where Max Vandenberg stayed on his feet. At 31 Himmel Street, Frau Holzefeld appeared to be waiting for me in the kitchen. A broken cup was in front of her, and in a last moment of awakeness, her face seemed to ask just what the hell had taken me so long. By contrast, Frau Diller was fast asleep. Her bulletproof glasses were shattered next to her bed. Her shop was obliterated, the counter landing across the road, and her framed photo of Hitler was taken from the wall and thrown to the floor. The man was positively mugged and beaten to the glass shattering pulp. I stepped on him on my way out. The Fiedlers were well organized, all in bed, all covered. Fifth Kiss was hidden up to his nose. At the Steiners, I ran my fingers through Barbara's lovely combed hair. I took the serious look from Kurt's serious, sleeping face, and one by one, I kissed the smaller ones goodnight. Then Rudy. Oh, crucified Christ, Rudy. He lay in his bed with one of his sisters. She must have kicked him or muscled her way into the majority of the bed space, because he was on the very edge with his arm around her. The boy slept. His candlelit hair ignited the bed, and I picked both him and Bettina up with their souls still in the blanket. If nothing else, they died fast and they were warm. The boy from the plane, I thought, the one with the teddy bear, where was Rudy's comfort? Where was someone to alleviate the robbery of his life? Who was there to soothe him as life's rug was snatched from under his sleeping feet? No one. There was only me. And I'm not too great at this sort of comforting thing, especially when my hands are cold and the bed is warm. I carried him softly through the broken street with one salty eye and a heavy, deathly heart. With him, I tried a little harder. I watched the contents of his soul for a moment and saw a black painted boy calling the name Jesse Owens as he ran through an imaginary tape. I saw him hip deep in some icy water, chasing a book. And I saw a boy lying in bed, imagining how a kiss would taste from his glorious next door neighbor. He does something to me, this boy, every time. It's his only detriment. He steps on my heart. He makes me cry. Lastly, the Hubermans. Hans. Papa. He was tall in bed, and I could see the silver through his eyelids. His soul sat up. It meant me. Those kinds of souls always do. The best ones. The ones who rise up and say, I know who you are, and I'm ready. Not that I want to go, of course, but I will come. Those souls are always light because more of them have been put out. More of them have already found their way to other places. This one was sent out by the breath of an accordion, the odd taste of champagne in the summer, and the art of promise keeping. He lay in my arms and rested. There was an itchy lung for a last cigarette and an immense magnetic pull toward the basement for the girl who was his daughter and was writing a book down there that he hoped to read one day. Liesel. His soul whispered it as I carried him, but there was no Liesel in that house. Not for me, anyway. For me, there was only a Rosa, and yes, I truly think I picked her up mid snore, for her mouth was open and her papery pink lips were still in the act of moving. If she'd seen me, I'm sure she would have called me a sockle, though I would not have taken it badly. After reading The Book Thief, I discovered that she called everyone that. Sockle, Samich, especially the people she loved. Her elastic hair was out. It rubbed against the pillow, and her wardrobe body had risen with the beating of her heart. Make no mistake, the woman had a heart. She had a bigger one than people would think. There was a lot in it, stored up, high in miles of hidden shelving. Remember that she was the woman with the instrument strapped to her body in the long moon-slit night. She was a Jew feeder without a question in the world on a man's first night in Bolching. And she was an arm reacher, deep into a mattress, to deliver a sketchbook to a teenage girl. The last luck, I moved from street to street and came back for a single man named Schultz at the bottom of Himmel. He couldn't hold out inside the collapsed house, and I was carrying his soul up Himmel Street when I noticed the LSE shouting and laughing. There was a small valley in the mountain range of rubble. The hot sky was red and turning. Pepper steaks were starting to swirl, and I became curious. Yes, I knew what I told you at the beginning. Usually, my curiosity leads to the dreaded witnessing of some kind of human outcry. But on this occasion, I have to say that although it broke my heart, I was, and still am, glad I was there. When they pulled her out, it's true that she started to wail and scream for Hans Huberman. The man of the LSE attempted to keep her in their powdery arms, but the book thief managed to break away. Desperate humans often seem able to do this. She did not know where she was running, for Himmel Street no longer existed. Everything was new and apocalyptic. Why was the sky red? How could it be snowing? And why did the snowflakes burn her arms? Lisa slowed to a staggering walk and concentrated up ahead. Where's Frau Dillers? She thought. Where's. She wandered a short while longer until the man who found her took her arm and kept talking. You're just in shock, my girl. It's just shock. You're going to be fine. What's happened? Liesel asked. Is this still Himmel Street? Yes, the man had disappointed eyes. What he had seen these past few years? This is Himmel. You got bombed, my girl. Es tut mir leid, Schatzi. I'm sorry, darling. The girl's mouth wandered on, even if her body was now still. She had forgotten her previous wails for Hans Huberman. That was years ago. A bombing will do that. She said, we have to get my papa, my mama. We have to get Max out of the basement. If he's not there, he's in the hallways, looking out the window. He does that sometimes when there's a raid. He doesn't get to look much at the sky, you see. I have to tell him how the weather looks now. He'll never believe me. Her body buckled at that moment, and the LSE man caught her and sat her down. We'll move her in a minute, he told his sergeant. The book thief looked at what was heavy and hurting in her hand. The book. The words. Her fingers were bleeding, just like they had on her arrival there. The LSE man lifted her and started to lead her away. A wooden spoon was on fire. A man walked past with a broken accordion case, and Lisa could see the instrument inside. She could see its white teeth and the black notes in between. They smiled at her and triggered an alertness to her reality. We were bombed, she thought, and now she turned to the man at her side and said, That's my papa's accordion. Again, that's my papa's accordion. Don't worry, young girl, you're safe. Just come a little farther. But Liesel did not come. She looked to where the man was taking the accordion and followed him. With the red sky still showering its beautiful ash, she stopped the tall LSE worker and said, I'll take that if you like. It's my papa's. Softly, she took it from the man's hand and began carrying it off. It was right about then that she saw the first body. The accordion case fell from her grip. The sound of an explosion. Frau Holzapfel was scissored on the ground. The next dozen seconds of Liesel Memiger's life. She turns on her heel and looks as far as she can down this ruined canal that was once Himmel Street. She sees two men carrying a body, and she follows them. When she saw the rest of them, Liesel coughed. She listened momentarily as a man told the others that they had found one of the bodies in pieces in one of the maple trees. There were shocked pajamas and torn faces. It was the boy's hair she saw first. Rudy? She did more than mouth the word now. Rudy. He lay with yellow hair and closed eyes, and the book thief ran toward him and fell down. She dropped the black book. Rudy! She sobbed. Wake up! She grabbed him by the shirt and gave him just the slightest disbelieving shake. Wake up, Rudy! And now, as the sky went on heating and showering ash, Lisa was holding Rudy Steiner's shirt by the front. Rudy, please! The tears grappled with her face. Rudy, please, wake up! God damn it, wake up! I love you! Come on, Rudy, come on! Jesse Owens, don't you know I love you? Wake up, wake up, wake up! But nothing cared. The rubble just climbed higher. Concrete hills with caps of red. A beautiful, tear-stomped girl shaking the dead. Come on, Jesse Owens! But the boy did not wake. In disbelief, Liesel buried her head in Rudy's chest. She held his limp body, trying to keep him from lolling back, until she needed to return him to the butchered ground. She did it gently. Slow, slow. God, Rudy. She leaned down and looked at his lifeless face, and Liesel kissed her best friend, Rudy Steiner, soft and true on the lips. He tasted dusty and sweet. He tasted like regret in the shadows of trees and the glow of an anarchist's suit collection. She kissed him long and soft, and when she pulled herself away, she touched his mouth with her fingers. Her hands were trembling, her lips were fleshy, and she leaned in once more, this time losing control and misjudging it. Their teeth collided on the demolished world of Himmel Street. She did not say goodbye. She was incapable, and after a few more minutes at his side, she was able to tear herself from the ground. It amazes me what humans can do, even when the streams are flowing down their faces and they stagger on, coughing and searching and finding. The next discovery the bodies of Mama and Papa, both lying tangled in the gravel bedsheet of Himmel Street. Lisa did not run or walk or move at all. Her eyes had scoured the humans and stopped hazily when she noticed the tall man and the short wardrobe woman. That's my mama. That's my papa. The words were stapled to her. They're not moving, she said quietly. They're not moving. Perhaps if she stood still long enough, it would be they who moved. But they remained motionless for as long as Liesel did. I realized at that moment that she was not wearing any shoes. What an odd thing to notice right then. Perhaps I was trying to avoid her face, for the book thief was truly an irretrievable mess. She took a step and didn't want to take any more, but she did. Slowly, Lisa walked to her mama and papa and sat down between them. She held mama's hand and began speaking to her. Remember when I came here, mama? I clung to the gate and cried. Do you remember what you said to everyone on the street that day? Her voice wavered now. You said, what are you assholes looking at? She took Mama's hand and touched her wrist. Mama, I know that I liked when you came to school and told me Max had woken up. Did you know I saw you with Papa's accordion? She tightened her grip on the hardening hand. I came and watched you, and you were beautiful. God damn it, you were so beautiful, Mama. Many moments of avoidance. Papa. She would not and could not look at Papa. Not yet. Not now. Papa was a man with silver eyes, not dead ones. Papa was an accordion. But his bellows were all empty. Nothing went in and nothing came out. She began to rock back and forth. A shrill, quiet, smearing note was caught somewhere in her mouth until she was finally able to turn to Papa. At that point, I couldn't help it. I walked around to see her better. and from the moment I witnessed her face again, I could tell that this was who she loved the most. Her expression stroked the man on his face. It followed one of the lines down his cheek. He had sat in the washroom with her and taught her how to roll a cigarette. He gave bread to a dead man on Munich Street and told the girl to keep reading in the bomb shelter. Perhaps if he didn't, she might not have ended up riding in the basement. Papa, the accordionist, and Himmel Street. One could not exist without the other because for Liesel, both were home. Yes, that's what Hans Huberman was for Liesel, Meminger. She turned around and spoke to the LSE. Please, she said, my papa's accordion. Could you get it for me? After a few minutes of confusion, an older member brought the Eaton case and Liesel opened it. She removed the injured instrument and laid it next to Papa's body. Here, Papa. And I can promise you something, because it was a thing I saw many years later, a vision in the book thief herself, that as she knelt next to Hans Huberman, she watched him stand and play the accordion. He stood and strapped it on the Alps of broken houses and played the accordion with kindness, silver eyes, and even a cigarette slouched on his lips. He even made a mistake and laughed in the lovely hindsight. The bellows breathed and the tall man played for Lisa Miminger one last time as the sky was slowly taken from the stove. Keep playing, Papa. Papa stopped. He dropped the accordion and his silver eyes continued to rest. There was only one body now on the ground, and Lisa lifted him up and hugged him. She wept over the shoulder of Hans Huberman. Goodbye, Papa. You saved me. You taught me to read. No one can play like you. I'll never drink champagne. No one can play like you. Her arms held him. She kissed his shoulder. She couldn't bear to look at his face anymore, and she placed him down again. The book thief wept till she was gently taken away. Later, they remembered the accordion, but no one noticed the book. There was much work to be done, and with a collection of other materials, the book thief was stepped on several times and eventually picked up without even a glance and thrown aboard a garbage truck. Just before the truck left, I climbed quickly up and took it in my hand. It's lucky I was there. Then again, who am I kidding? I'm in most places at least once. And in 1943, I was just about everywhere. The last section, the epilogue. Death and Liesel. It had been many years since all of that, but there's still plenty of work to do. I can promise you that the world is a factory. The sun stirs it, the humans rule it, and I remain. I carry them away. As for what's left of this story, I will not skirt around any of it, because I'm tired. I'm so tired, and I will tell it as straightly as I can. Last fact. I should tell you the book thief died only yesterday. Liesel Meminger lived to a very old age, far away from Molching and the demise of Himmel Street. She died in the suburb of Sydney. The house number was 45, the same as the Fielder's shelter, and the sky was the best blue of afternoon. Like her papa, her soul was sitting up. In her final visions, she saw her three children, her grandchildren, her husband, and the long list of lives that merged with hers. Among them, lit like lanterns, were Hans and Rosa Huberman, her brother, and the boy whose hair remained the color of lemons forever. But a few other visions were in there as well. Come with me, and I'll tell you a story. I'll show you something. Wood in the afternoon. When Himmel Street was cleared, Liesel Meminger had nowhere to go. She was the girl they referred to as the one with the accordion, and she was taken to the police, who were in the throes of deciding what to do with her. She sat in a very hard chair. The accordion looked at her through the hole in the case. It took 3 hours in the police station for the mayor and fluffy-haired woman to show their faces. Everyone says there's a girl, the lady said, who survived on Himmel Street. A policeman pointed. Ilse Herman offered to carry the case, but Liesel held it firmly in her hand as they walked down the police station steps. A few blocks down Munich Street, There was a clear line separating the bombed from the fortunate. The mayor drove. Elsa sat with her in the back. The girl let her hold her hand on top of the accordion case, which sat between them. It would have been easy to say nothing, but Liesel had the opposite reaction to her devastation. She sat in the exquisite spare room of the mayor's house and spoke to herself, well, into the night. She ate very little. The only thing she didn't do at all was wash. For 4 days, she carried around the remains of Himmel Street on the carpets and floorboards of 8 Grand Strasse. She slept a lot and didn't dream, and on most occasions was sorry to wake up. Everything disappeared when she was asleep. On the day of the funerals, she still hadn't bathed, and Elsa Herman asked politely if she'd like to. Previously, she had only shown her the bath and given her a towel. People who were at the service of Hans and Rosa Huberman always talked about the girl who stood there wearing a pretty dress and a layer of Himmel Street dirt. There was also a rumor that later in the day she walked fully clothed into the Amper River and said something very strange. Something about a kiss. Something about a samage. How many times did she have to say goodbye? After that, there were weeks and months and a lot of war. She remembered her books and the moments of war sorrow, especially the ones that were made up for her and the one that saved her life. One morning, in a renewed state of shock, she even walked back down to Himmel Street to find them, but nothing was left. There was no recovery from what had happened. That would take decades, would take a long life. There were 2 ceremonies for the Steiner family. The first was immediately upon their burial. The second was as soon as Alex Steiner made it home, when he was given leave after the bombing. Since the news had found him, Alex had been whittled away. Crucified Christ, he'd said. If only I'd let Rudy go to that school. You save someone, you kill them. How was he supposed to know? The only thing he truly did know was that he'd have done anything to have been on Himmel Street that night, so that Rudy survived rather than himself. That was something he told Liesel on the steps of 8 Grand Strasse when he rushed up there after hearing of her survival. That day on the steps, Alex Steiner was sawn apart. Liesel told him that she had kissed Rudy's lips. It embarrassed her, but she thought he might have liked to know. There were wooden teardrops and an oaky smile. In Liesel's vision, the sky I saw was gray and glossy, a silver afternoon. Next chapter is Max. When the war was over and Hitler had delivered himself to my arms, Alex Steiner resumed work in his tailor shop. There was no money in it, but he busied himself there for a few hours each day, and Liesel often accompanied him. They spent many days together, often walking to Dachau after its liberation, only to be denied by the Americans. Finally, in October of 1945, a man with swampy eyes, feathers of hair, and a clean-shaven face walked into the shop. He approached the counter. Is there someone here by the name of Liesel Miminger? Yes, she's in the back, said Alex. He was hopeful, but he wanted to be sure. May I ask who's calling on her? Liesel came out. They hugged and cried and fell to the floor. And now, the last chapter of The Book Thief, The Handover Man. Yes, I have seen a great many things in this world. I attend the greatest disasters and work for the greatest villains. But then there are other moments. There's a multitude of stories, a mere handful, as I had previously suggested, that I allow to distract me as I work, just as the colors do. I pick them up in the unlikeliest places, and I make sure they remember them as I go about my work. The Book Thief is one such story. When I traveled to Sydney and took Liesel away, I was finally able to do something I'd been waiting on for a long time. I put her down, and we walked along Anzac Avenue, near the soccer field. and I pulled a dusty black book from my pocket. The old woman was astonished. She took it in her hand and said, "Is this really it?" I nodded. With great trepidation, she opened the book thief and turned the pages. I can't believe, even though the text had faded, she was able to read her words. The figures of her soul touched a story that was written so long ago in her Himmel Street basement. She sat down on the curb, and I joined her. "Did you read it?" she asked, but she did not look at me. Her eyes were fixed to the words. I nodded many times. "Could you understand it?" And at one point, there was a great pause. A few cars drove by each way. Their drivers were Hitlers and Hubermans, and Maxes, Killers, Dillers, and Steiners. I wanted to tell the book thief many things about beauty and brutality, but what could I tell her about those things that she didn't already know? I wanted to explain that I am constantly overestimating and underestimating the human race, that rarely do I ever simply estimate it. I wanted to ask her how the same thing could be so ugly and so glorious, and its words and stories so damning and brilliant. None of those things, however, came out of my mouth. All I was able to do was turn to Lisa Meminger and tell her the only truth I truly know. I said it to the book thief, and I say it now to you. A last note from your narrator. I am haunted by humans. So that's reading of the book thief. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed reading it to you, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. It's a nice long weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend, and we will talk again on Tuesday.